Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Happy Tuesday. I took Seth's thing.
Oh,
I took it.
You'll
I just
never take my thing,
Whoa.
even if you say it, Mike.
Whoa.
Yeah, you can't say the
All
right.
right. Good morning. Welcome to Tuesday. Seth,
Happy Tuesday.
there it is.
What at that? What at that?
Wow. I've been programmed after doing this, 82 times. It's Tuesday, and I'm like, I got to hear it now. So it actually happens. Wow. Subliminal messaging to me on this one.
Subliminal.
All the words. So I wanted to just kind of point out, a quick opener today. For those of you who haven't kind of been around the interwebs, there's a project called Deneb, which has been been out for about a year or so now. It's just getting a release update on, I think it's the app source. I think it's going to version 1.1. But Daniel Marsh-Patrick is the gentleman who's been producing this one. It's absolutely quite incredible. It sits on top of a much bigger visualization suite called Vega and Vega Lite. Super cool program. But there's been a number of people in the community that are starting to pick it up and communicate and talk about it. There's actually a very interesting blog post that I'd like to point out from Carrie. I'm going to try my best with that last name, so please have grace with me. Carrie
the drill here.
Kolosko, I think is her last name. But she's out of Australia, and she's produced a number of really cool Deneb visuals. She did one series on custom KPI cards using Deneb. They look absolutely amazing. Really sharp looking cards. But anyway, she's got a gallery of visuals she's starting to build, and this is all kind of happening about the same time. We just started doing a video series with Daniel Marsh-Patrick just to give you the intro and kind of one very basic, here's what Deneb can do, videos on YouTube. So we have a YouTube playlist for that as well. And be aware, there's going to be more content coming around Deneb. We really like it. So if you haven't had a chance, I'll see if I can go find the blog from Carrie, and I'll put that in the post so you can see what she's talking about and how cool Deneb is. I think this is a big gap. This is like I guess I have to say, if you're familiar with the standard visuals, and then you have Charticulator, this is one step heavier on code above Charticulator. I'd say this is one step deeper into what's going on. But
yeah,
when you add more code, it seems like you get more control about what you want to build.
I was actually just about to ask you, since Charticulator is obviously taken off, I want to see, like, once you do this as go through the video series, start really working with it, I want to see the comparison of where do they each fit. Like, would you use Deneb and not use Charticulator? Where would you use Charticulator where Deneb doesn't make the most sense? Because they obviously are more, this is like the Tableau Editor 3 of visuals, both of these.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely getting to the port. So I feel like a lot of these custom visuals, there's a spectrum, right? And I start every engagement that I talk about when I do a presentation around standard visuals and custom visuals or Deneb or Charticulator. I talk about a spectrum, right? On one end is everything that's built in. You drag some fields over, visuals just appear. Great. On the other end of the spectrum, you're building software developers. Like, you need someone who's a computer developer or a D3.js developer, a JavaScript developer, who knows what they're doing and understands how the Power BI ecosystem works. So these are what I would call visuals that sit somewhere in the middle between the easy and the super hard. And so just figuring out where it is in that easy spectrum is very helpful. And I feel like Charticulator is a great tool. It comes with a UI that allows you to drag and drop fields. It's a good visualization program, but it's been a little bit buggy, and they've been working out and figuring it out and cleaning it up. Deneb has been around a lot longer, or actually Vega has been around a lot longer. And so that program is more like a wrapper around the Vega specification. And you can there's a ton of examples on the Vega website. There's a whole bunch of stuff people are building quickly. And the stuff that you can get out of this thing is, it is very different. I mean, these things you can build, it's very creative what you can build with this stuff. I really like it.
Am I hearing your loyalty waiver from Charticulator?
Oh, no, in no way at all.
Okay.
This is just another one.
I don't know.
This is another knife on the Swiss Army toolbox.
Okay.
I love one of the comments in the chat, like Deneb versus Charticulator is like HD DVD versus Blu-ray. Like, Mike's a movie fan. Mike, like, it doesn't matter what form.
It doesn't matter. As long as I can get it off of YouTube, it's fine.
Well, these are no matter what you do, they're absolutely. This is not going to be like they're a partnership. It's always going to be one versus the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless you prove otherwise.
I think what becomes harder though is just knowing which one to use when, and then which one has like again, it's a lot of as us as architects. It's not an it depends question. It's more about what can you maintain longer term kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Do you prefer? Are you getting the reliability and the performance out of Deneb versus Charticulator? If you edit a Charticulator visual, does it do what you want it to do? Which of the two projects are getting more updates, right? It's kind of one of these things where you figure out what you're comfortable with and try and build it. And I'm fairly confident everything you build in Charticulator could probably be rebuilt in Deneb. Like there's a lot of flexibility there. Anyways, I just put in the chat window Carrie's gallery. She has a whole bunch of Deneb templates that she's putting out. The neat thing about Deneb, you actually have the ability of downloading, or you create the visual. When Daniel and I were kind of working on, he was showing me the visual. I was like, oh, dude, we need to really have this ability to export what people do, but not share personal data. Like these are templates. We need to get templates out of this. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. And so he worked on we kind of refined the idea of this templating thing. So I think these tools take off when you have a gallery of free-built, creatively built things that you can go pick from and say, oh, I'm just going to go pick up these things off the internet and then use them, and then you tweak them or modify them to what you want to do on your stuff. So I think that's where the strength of these external tools come from, is the idea you can make templates, templates can be shared, and that's when things start really taking off. So
all right,
goes to say, the last note here is on GitHub, we actually have a Deneb Git repo for any templates that are made for Deneb. So I've reached out to Carrie, and she said she allowed me to take all of her templates off her gallery and then also add them to the Git repo, because we already have a handful of Deneb templates out there already.
My last put you on the spot question. Let's say you have $100 for buying the stocks of Charticulator and Deneb. What are you putting on each right now?
Right now, I would probably say probably about $30-$40 on Charticulator. I would probably about 50 or 60 on Deneb. I like the fact that it's sitting on top of a Vega standard, which is something that's much more rich around being able to have. Again, I like having the code. Yeah. Code does not scare me. So to click and drag and drop things, yes, it's okay. But if I can understand how Deneb works at a core level, I think I have a lot more flexibility there. And it seems to be, for my opinion, that code's been around a little bit longer. It's a little bit more stable. Like once you were able to draw something, it's a bit more stable. And one of the things I'll note here, when you stretch a visual, so like if you take a visual and you make it a square and then you stretch it to be more like a rectangle, the Charticulator visual holds its aspect ratio, and you can't stretch the visual to automatically stretch for the full size of the visual. So you actually can get little bars on the side of the Charticulator visual that don't stretch out. I think it's fixable, but Deneb does that automatically. So Deneb will automatically stretch the visual to match whatever your size is. So if you build the visual and then you automatically stretch it, it's not that big a deal. So there's some features there that I really like. Big. Yeah,
that's worth $10 right there. Well, since it's JSON too, theoretically you could also do a UI pretty simply, right? Or does that take away the features?
So this is also the part where things get interesting. Is it's just JSON. There is a defined spec around it. The Vega program, or the code that runs Deneb, there actually is a visual builder. You can actually go to their website, visually build what you want with a drag and drop UI interface, and it builds the specification behind the scenes for you.
Really?
So again, it's one of these things where it's like, oh man, this is kind of interesting. So I don't know where Deneb has that ability, but you technically can go out to their visual builder, and this was done in our 101 video. I think you can go out to their visual builder, build a simple bar chart, copy the JSON, and just drop it into Deneb, and it just works. You have to do some remapping of columns, where the data columns came from, but other than that, it's intended to work that way. So there's some interesting patterns there that I think will make things. I really like it.
That's big.
It's a cool project. I'll just say that. These are two things. Microsoft is doing the right thing where they are pulling in Charticulator and it's on App Source. That's been a good thing. And now Deneb's on App Source and certified. So that's also another good thing. I would have just thought, my opinion here is Microsoft should have these are two tools that should have been built into desktop day one. They should have had them, right? To me, that is a Tableau killer. Anything else that's a visual killer. Like This now adds full custom everything. You can build whatever you dream of at this point. So that's why I like it.
Whatever I dream of.
Sure. You can have little
Sweet.
fish tanks with fishes in them.
I was talking to Seth actually right before this. Seth, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do a epic bike ride this summer, and we're going to map it out in Deneb. We're going to do our.
Now,
we're going to do our.
now
average
you're
sta-
talking. Now you're
Yeah.
talking. Right.
Yeah.
Now I can't get out of that bike ride.
Yeah. Now it's on the podcast. Yeah.
Right.
So
Because we're gonna wrap it into the podcast and Power BI.
see, yeah, because I got the
Okay,
bike computer
okay.
that literally stores every piece of data, like your cadence, your speed, your heart
Yeah.
rate. We're going to
Yeah.
map this all in Deneb.
Okay.
Blog post. I'm way
That'll
too
be an
excited.
interesting line chart. Who's healthier, Tony or Seth or Tommy?
Mine's
It's
gonna go
obvious.
straight down.
I'm still riding on a Huffy. I mean, you guys have fancy bikes. I'm still
Yeah, it might take you a while, Mike.
pick up
I
my
make
Walmart special.
Way too many promises in February. That's for sure.
I do need to get out and be. So that has been. It's interesting you guys talk about that. That's something I need to get to more in this year is getting out and be more active. When you walk down to your basement to work,
It's bad.
It's
man.
It's
not
bad.
a requirement. Yeah.
I mean, before I would go to places to work, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, you get like 3,000 steps. I'm like, and everyone like, oh, ragging, man, 3,000 steps, it's so little. You got to get 10,000 a day, and now I'm like, 50 steps, like 20 steps, 100 under 1,000. That's so bad. I need to
it's
get
a
up and move
shame
more.
why I like bike riding so much because there's literally so many data points per minute action that you do that gets tracked nowadays. If you have like the right technology, so like it's called a Wahoo. It's just a bike computer, and per inch that you do, it tracks the heart rate, your speed, your cadence, all this stuff, and you can download this data and
It's
just
called
go crazy.
It's called a
with it.
Wahoo.
That's
Sounds
the
like something
brand.
you are, Tommy. You're
Wahoo!
you're a Wahoo.
Don't say your Wario stereotypes or Luigi, but it's it's basically this I don't remember the actual.
It looks like a
product
Garmin,
name.
doesn't it? It's kind of
Yeah,
like a Garmin
it's
looking
exactly
thing.
like a Garmin, and
Yeah.
it just like if you have a heart rate monitor, so it tracks all the stuff
Oh,
per
interesting.
mile.
Okay.
Or like so, and I basically download this data, have it synced, and then publish it to Power BI, so I actually see like where I want to be. But maybe that's why I like bike riding because it's just literally just data points at all
It's like
places.
literally a video game after I've already played.
Right.
That's hilarious. Do you have to download it from the device or where do you put it?
So it syncs with another thing called Strava, and once the data gets synced, I get the database. So there's nothing I have to do. I just say I'm done with my ride. It gets pushed up to the cloud.
I want a real time. I want a real time Power BI. I want a real time published to web report of Tommy riding bikes around.
There you go.
Oh,
There you
when I figure out
probably do it
Deneb,
off
that's
an
what
app.
you'll have. So
Do it off an
You'll-
app.
I want to make a Deneb of my face just getting sadder and sadder the tireder I get.
Oh, that's funny.
All righty.
Very cool.
Coming to you May 2022.
May 20 when it's not snowy on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love Dan Meitzer. 12 minutes into Staying Productive podcast and still off target in a rabbit hole.
Dan, on point, on point.
Hey,
Yeah,
man.
on point.
Hey.
Here's what not to do when staying on target.
Yeah. All right, Dan.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We'll get into it.
Today's topic is our most productive methods. One of which is Tommy's would be bike riding. I think is apparently one of those. So keeps him productive, burn off some energy. Yeah, let's just defining productivity. How would you quantify that? That's kind of a fuzzy term in general. How do you quantify what is productive? Well, at the end of the day, you'll come up for dinner and you'll be like, my kids always ask me, "How was your day, Dad?" And I was like, "Today felt good. I got stuff done." Or it'll be like, "I did a lot of work today, but I made no progress." Like those are kind of like the two responses I feel like I say the most. And so I had to actually really think about it. I'm like, was today a productive day, or was today like a challenging day where I did work, but I didn't make it anywhere? So how would you define a productive? Tommy. I'll give it to Tommy
Okay.
first. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, and I'm thinking about this in the context of a Power BI user because I think that's a very good case where you could be productive, but not necessarily get anything done because you might have learned something. This literally happened to me on Friday where I was trying to figure out run rate in a different way and just struggling with it, but trying to learn it. I was able to get some output, some in a sense, something to show, but the amount of hours, would you quantify that as productive? But if I'm going to define productive as a Power BI pro, I think it's going to be two segments. Is you have a project or a report or a solution that you're working on, and it's your progress toward that. And I think the other side is your own learning case of like what output what outcome did you get for yourself from learning some skill or something that you developed. That takes more time. That may take a whole day, and you may not necessarily have something to show for it. So those are kind of the two use cases of productive that I would say. That one, there is a visible output, and the other, there's just a training or a skill or something under the tool belt. And I think those are very important. And at the same time, they can also be a threat to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you could say, I do need to learn this to get that output, but then you can go down the rabbit holes. But for the basic point of view, I'm going to say the two use cases are either acquiring something in your tool belt or the actual visible manifestation of an output of a solution. So,
Ooh.
I like both of those. The challenges around those are like, one is the to-do list, right? You have a lot
mhm,
of stuff to do.
yeah.
Did you deliver on a bunch of things? Like you get the very productive feeling, and it is being productive. And then on the other side of that, I think I'm not the only one in here, but if you go through this repeated process of, oh man, I don't know how to do that. And I think a lot of people shy away from actually just like go figure it, like take the steps to figure it out. And then when you comprehend something, right?
Mhm.
Like when you learn the new thing, that also is very productive because you're adding it to to the tool belt. I think another one I'd throw in there that I would define as being part of my productivity, output is creating a repeatable process, right? So
Mhm.
and sometimes like where I'm at, like it's like my job is building processes for the team, so everybody is doing the same things, so that the organization is passing back and forth and doing the same things all the time, because then you have efficiencies that you're building, right? So maybe it's not a process, but building efficiencies within whatever I'm doing. I also would classify as a very productive method to focus on.
I like that too.
What about you, Mike?
I, I'm gonna use the antimatter or the anti argument here. Maybe I think I'm saying the same things you guys are, but maybe mine's a mix of the two in a weird way. I feel like I've been productive when I can walk away from the day of work and not be thinking about the next thing I need to do. So sometimes that's I need to learn something. Sometimes that's a part of my to-do list. So if I can like walk away and have that feeling or that sensation of like, oh, I got stuff done today. Like, I mean, for me, it's definitely. I think I would definitely err on the side of I'm a bit more of like a to-do list. Like, I sit
Okay.
down in the morning. I try and make a list of all the things that need to get done that day or the things that are important for that day. Because there's some things that are like I could just do tomorrow, right? I don't have to worry about them. But there are some things that are like higher on that priority list. And if I can, again, I love the sprinting and the agile methodology. I will say, here's all the things I need to do. Let's put the most important ones towards the top of that list. And if I can get the most important 4 or 5, and if I walk down that list, I mean, I've said this before. Work's a beast. If you want to work more, there will always be more work for you to do. It
Yeah.
never ends. So you could spend all of your day, all your night, and all your weekends doing work things, and you'll never run out. Amazingly. so so at some point in time, you've got to put a cut line and say, I'm done. Like I'm finished, right? So for me to have like a good productive day is some of those high priority items need to get done on my list. And when those high priority items are done, it's not like a set number. It's just a matter of like at some point in that list, my mind can start relaxing because the pressure of the things on the list to get done is not as great as the things that were ordered on that list. Does that make sense?
Totally does.
Yeah.
I,
So
I
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I think this starts to delve into like some of the methods we may use, right? But I
True,
think
true.
you point out a really good point, and probably the hardest thing that I deal with in terms of being productive, which is choosing the time to shut off.
Yes,
Mhm.
you have to.
Because
Mm-hmm.
because the more you're working on something, whether that's, heavily engaged in building a report or meetings and management, whatever the case may be, like your body is going to say, I need a break, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, whether it's just intermittent breaks throughout the day to give yourself a mental breather. And at the end of the day, turn like drawing a cut line, and hopefully, I guess, Mike, of the laundry list of things to do, if I've cleared the top ones and I can
Yeah.
not think about work, that's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
But at the same time, like where I think the struggle is you have to choose a time to just cut it off no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Because they like after a certain point, it's a diminishing rate of return,
Mhm.
right? And maybe that's where like the bottom of the list it gets, it's the easy tasks that are just mundane that you have to get through.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I'm gonna quantify the one area that is perpetually causing me grief, it is knowing when to choose that marker for downtime.
Yeah.
That's actually a perfect point. I like both your points. When one with Mike, there's always work to do, and
Mm-hmm.
two, when to shut off. Where I don't think we can. I don't think I can look at this in a vacuum of one day's productivity, because you can be really productive one day, but to me, I can't look back on just the past 24 hours. This is probably like a week's time of have I been productive? Because you can be super productive for one day and work from 7 in the morning till 11 at night and then be worth nothing the next day or not have that same capacity.
Correct.
I think it's being consistent. For me, it's all about being consistent.
I,
Um, yeah, like
there's a
it,
strong story in here about being balanced as well.
balance.
I
Yeah,
am a person of imbalance. I
me
love
too.
the extremes. I just am. So
Yeah,
that's something I've had to personally work on is to not be so imbalanced in, to your point, Tommy. There are days where I'm like, I gotta get something done, and I'm up to like 1, 2 a.m.
yeah.
cranking it out, and then the next day
We
I'm
can't keep it up.
pounding coffee just to stay
Right.
awake. So it's so
Yeah.
imbalanced to on the side of the
Yeah.
spectrum of things.
Well, ultimately,
I-
ultimately, you're stealing your productivity from the next day.
I'm stealing
right.
to the future and putting it in
Right.
now. Correct.
To put it in DAX, I don't have a month to date productivity calculation. I have a rolling average one. So, because that's what I have to look at.
Yes.
Because, and I obviously there's other things you can do in the day. The micro things matter, the small things matter. But when I say, have I been productive? I'm looking at the last 2 weeks. Have I been consistent?
This feels like the tortoise and the hare kind of argument here as well, right? You can burn hard on a particular task until you get exhausted, and then the hare goes underneath the tree and takes a nap.
Yeah.
And then the tortoise is continually productive every day, all the time, just cranking out productivity. And at the end of the day, the tortoise has the ability to stay
Right.
long term and doing things. And uh, I also feel like this is especially, I mean, talking about like the social media aspect of things, right? YouTube videos, training, stuff that we do, right? This is another area where we have to stay in balance because I get really excited about something and I push really hard and I put out a bunch of videos. But the podcast has been something that's kind of kept me very consistently productive because I have a scheduled time to regularly like if you
Right.
if you told me to sit down and say, "Hey, Michael, go make
Yeah.
80 hours of content," I'd be like, "Yeah, I love the idea. This is great. Let's go do like 80 hours of stuff." And I'm like, it's daunting. Like that's a
Yeah.
full 2 weeks of work nonstop for a long time. And now here we are, almost a year later. We're getting much closer to that a higher number, and it's been just this, that steady, quarantine some time, make it a pattern, and just repeat the pattern. Just boom, 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 being consistent.
Right. I think too with any tool, like I also have the tendency, Mike, where whether the tool, the method, etc., I can go down rabbit holes with it if I hear certain keywords in that methodology that I
Hmm.
want to, because I'm one that I want to try to master something or learn all the things in the mindset that I'm going to make myself better. So, for example, like any productivity tool, like a Todoist or even Microsoft Task or even like VS Code, right?
Yep.
When I hear like variables, automation inside the tool, like in the documentation, I start going, "Oh, how could that help me?"
Yeah.
This literally happened Saturday. I'm doing one thing and I'm like, "Oh, I saw something online for VS Code snippets." I'm like, "Oh, that would really help." 3 hours into learning about snippets, and I'm like, and I haven't done anything for my previous tasks
Yep.
because
Yep.
I think
Been there, done that.
we've said this before, and I think this is the biggest thing as we get into the methods, tools, etc. Know what you need to know and then get out. And that's easier said than done. But if you're trying to learn something in terms of like, let's say the rolling average or, you know, with a variable, learn what you need to know and then move on.
I
Because I think that's the hardest thing is you getting out of that hole.
I think I like what you're saying there, and I like to think of learning new things in the context of understanding how they work, right?
Hmm.
So when I feel like a lot of times, especially when I've been building a lot of the architecture for the modern data warehouse or the modern data platform, whatever you want to call it, and so that's more of the enterprise everything behind Power BI, right? Power BI is the nice, pretty tabular model and a thin report, and then you boom, that's everyone loves that part of it. But to support all the data that goes into Power BI, there's a whole lot of other infrastructure behind the scenes, and I felt like I spent a lot of time trying to understand
Hmm.
how it works, and for me, to getting to learning to the point of understanding, I can now, when I talk about understanding something, I now am at a level where I can project other people's needs into my understanding of how this platform works and helps you to be a better architect, a solution
Right.
person. So I think that's an area where I look at here, but you don't want to hurt your productivity by spending so much time to understand how things work, right? So,
Yeah.
like to your point, Tommy, right? There's a time for learning. There needs to be time. You need to be planned for times to learn things, but they need to be time blocked, right? You need to be
Right.
you, and I call this when I do projects with people, I call it a spike. I think that's what it's very frequently called, right? Hey, we don't know what we don't know. We need to learn something. Let's just do a spike of 2 hours or a spike of 1 hour. We're gonna just discover things. We're gonna try to understand in a given amount of time. And if we get beyond that period of time, we're done. And just
Right.
making that condition up front helps you set boundaries around, okay, I have this task I'm doing over the weekend.
Right.
I'm not going to burn 3 hours just randomly Googling things because I think it's interesting, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
focus in. I'm going to give
Yep.
myself some time to understand. And if I can't get it, I'll shelf it and come back to it later.
However you need to. For me, it's the lists, right? It is having an agenda for a day, and then knocking out that agenda. And I think that's like, if it's not a list for you and it's just mental, that's fine. But I think the point here that I 100% agree with is be intentional with your task.
Hmm.
Like, stay focused on the thing at hand, because there is a world of distraction.
Yes.
There is recently I was reading a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, and like it's a very good book from the standpoint that it teaches you methods and ways in which you remove distraction, and how much distraction has impacted productivity of people in general. The challenge that we face, I think more so than, maybe, well, I think everybody faces to some degree, is
Yeah.
you're on a computer that is the portal to anything you want to know,
Yeah.
or any social network that you want to belong to or are belonging to, right?
Hmm.
So the temptation for when any sort of work gets hard or complicated, to just mentally check into something else, and 15 minutes of your time goes, or
Right.
Hmm.
or more, right?
Yes.
Is always there and present. And what what he teaches is like different ways in which you try to focus in on the thing that you need to accomplish, as well as remove as many of those distractions as possible,
Yes.
right? Because, and I think this is like more apropos for engineers, right? Where um you're a what do we call,
Mechanical engineer. I love those.
you're an individual contributor,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
um you want to minimize as many meetings as possible in your day
Correct.
to a window. Like, if I could take what I know now and back it up, I was always looking to be in meetings or wanted to be, part of the thing. Like, no, man, I would say you have an hour and a half in a day. It's always in the same time block, and the rest of my day is focus time. And in that focus time, I'm going to knock out these things, right? But interjected in there, give yourself the breaks,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
after 2 hours, take a 15-minute mental break and go do the thing, that you wanted to do
Yeah.
on social media, or eat lunch and watch a video, because if as long it you train yourself to focus in and get the things done in those 2-hour windows, and you can dive deeper into the problem areas that we need to solve, like around Power Query or DAX, or some of those challenging areas that require a lot of focus and attention to nail. And then you give yourself a breather. And if you have the opportunity to schedule your day in that way, take advantage of it, because that is where, at the end of the day, you'll be more productive, like tenfold, than I think anybody else. But it also speaks to the same thing that you said um, earlier with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's scheduled, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
So it's the thing that over time you're accruing knowledge, you're accruing, a building up of productivity, in the same way you're doing that in your personal workspace, because you've defined that these times in your schedule are for knocking out bodies of work.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe your day looks like, you know the first part of the day is, building out my agenda. What are the things I want to accomplish? Then I have meetings, right? Or I don't. And then followed that by that is like my deep dive into the hardest problems of the day,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
right? Or maybe it starts a little easy and you get into some template building or visualization, or tweaking some bugs, and then the latter part is. But I think it's like, what I've learned is trying to be intentional with your schedule and blocking out those times, is probably one of the biggest boons to becoming much more productive than just letting things fall in place as they may.
And yeah, that's pretty interesting because, sorry, Mike,
No,
but
go ahead, stop. Go ahead,
just
Tommy.
just
I'll write my
We
I'll write
can
my
have
comment down
both.
so I can remember it later.
um because most things that we do, first off, I'll say I love what you said, because I think in order to stay productive, it's you got to be intentional what you're trying to achieve for that day, or for even that task, right? It's like, I'm going in here to do X and I'm done with this when I do X. But when what we deal with, a lot of it can't be completed in a day, right? So like
Mhm.
most of the projects that we're working on. So I guess the question there is, how do you know, in a sense, like when to stop on a certain project when you know it's like a 2-week project or it's a week project, or
Oh, yeah.
and that's the hard part, because
Dude,
you can just keep going.
sure. I would say this: one of the best skills you could probably learn is how to properly estimate your work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a skill. You have to, like, you either have to accrue a bunch of experience to be able to say, I think this is going to take me the X amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a perfect way to do that, Tommy, would be, okay, I have no idea what like how long this project going to take. I'm going to assume it's going to take me a day for the ETL, a couple days for modeling, in 2 days for visualization, whatever, right? And that's your schedule. Like, lay out what are the things that you want to accomplish in the day, in the week, right? And then, did your estimate of, did it fall into a day?
Right.
Were you able to accomplish all of that thing? And now at the end of the project, you now have it, like, if you're intentional about your work and the things you want to accomplish, you now have data on the other side of this that says, I thought like this scenario I thought was going to take 5, it took 7. So next time I have a project like this, I'm going to estimate probably 7 or
Yeah.
8,
Well,
right?
oh man, there's just so many good things here. So this is my biggest problem when I was in consulting the first time for another company. They you were allowed to estimate things, and a lot of times you'll get stuff on your plate where you've never done it before, or it's something that's been like, well, I've done something similar, but it's not exactly like this, and you don't know where the time suck is going to be. There's always something you don't know, right? If you knew everything about what you had to build, like if you waterfall the program, yeah, no problem. We can waterfall it. But a lot of times when you do consulting, you're expected to have a set number, right? Hey, Tommy, I want you to build this report. Okay, how many data sources?
How long is it
Right.
going to take?
3.
Yeah.
How many days is this going to take? How much is it going to cost me to get this report produced?
Right.
Right? What is it going to? And so there's this whole kind of process around what does that look like? And again, to your point, Seth, right? If you can't measure what you don't track. So if you just start
Right.
working on it, anything, even in your internal business, like I mean, Oh man, there's so many points here. This is really hard. It's really hard to get into something and being able to say, okay, I'm going to build this report. I've got these data sources. I'm going to do this data engineering to get it where I want. Right? If you do that and never track how long it actually took you, like in corporate life, I never tracked anything how long it took me. People just asked me to do stuff, and I would just
Okay.
do it.
Right.
But in consulting, when someone's paying you to do that work, you're tracking every hour of what you're doing. And I have a much better grasp on how long is it going to take you to model this kind of data. Where's the hard part? Hard part is not connecting to the data for me anymore. The hard part is doing the data engineering and making sure you get the data rules right. It's the T portion of the ETL is the long pole in a lot of this work because there's junky data. And I don't care how many people tell you this is good data, we got it cleaned. Bull
Yeah.
crap. That is
Yeah.
never the truth. I have never walked into a project where I had clean data. Everything's always a mess
Because they wouldn't hire you.
because they wouldn't hire me. Well, and everyone's naive to what's going. Like no one's done any data quality on this.
Right.
Show me your data quality report. Well, we just connect to it with SQL. Okay. Well, did you know that your users are shoving in text values into a number string value where you would expect like all kinds of weird stuff? People are weird. They figure out how to make stuff work and they abuse systems because they can and it gets their job done. Like so there's always bad data. And so that transformation part is where I find there's like a lot of work taken up. So when I do estimates now, I can easily estimate or more easily estimate what that looks like. And so I learned some techniques from a gentleman that I worked with in my last consulting place. He did this thing where he did like t-shirt sizes. So you have 10 tables you need to transform or load in, right? A couple of them are going to be easy. A handful of them are going to be medium hard, and a couple of them are going to be ridiculously hard. So he always kind of peanut butter spread, okay, if an average table takes you 3 hours to load, you're going to have a couple of them that are going to be easy. So let's say an hour and a half, and you're going to have a couple of them that are really hard. So they're going to be like, 6-7 hours in depth, right? And so when you're doing these estimates on things, do one of the hard ones and try and maybe find one of the medium ones. Do one of them, figure out how long it took you, and then you can roughly project forward, okay, these hard tables took me 2 days. Okay, great. At least now we know what a baseline is for like one of these hard tables. Then we can either beat that or improve on that. But now you have a baseline for doing these estimates a lot better. So yeah. Oh man, there's so much to unpack there
Yeah.
in just that scenario.
I like that because I was actually just thinking one thing I want to try to start is, again, to me, it's all about consistency. And I think
Mhm.
regardless of if you've never done it before or if you have done it, you're still trying to estimate. But for me, if I were to say, if I was my own boss or like my micromanager boss and I
Yep.
knew everything I knew and I was reporting on myself, I would want to know, like, obviously every day what I was doing, but like the 2 weeks, what have you done? Like what output have you done? I might start messaging myself once a day and then like every week on a summary of just what I accomplished to kind of see that overall output. Because to me, it's like if I need to stay consistent with the output. Because again, there's times with you, to your point, Mike, where you think it's going to be easy, then you get into it and you're like, what the crap? Like because
Yeah.
everything's wrong, and that's going to push out in terms of what you thought. But again, I think if I can write to myself once a day, like we fixed this, we looked into this kind of thing. It's like we're still investigating, we're still pushing forward,
Mhm.
and I can consistently do that again, regardless of the project, whether it's Stacks or Power Query or a data set or a report or the help desk tickets
Yes.
saying, we respond to these people, we're moving forward here. I think that's kind of, in a sense, what I would feel productive, because I think part of this too is subjective, because
Mhm.
some people may do one thing and they're like, I feel very productive today. But I think if I can at least write to myself and say, okay, is that satisfactory to me? I think that would help.
I think another thing I'd recommend in here too is um to my younger self is if you're in an engineering org, right? A
Mhm.
lot of this is done for you with tools, right? Or your
Mhm.
manager, they plan out your schedule, they tell you what needs to get done, you've groomed it and you've estimated how long you think it's going to take. And what I would recommend is don't fall into the trap of just doing what you're told.
Mm.
Like understand the full spectrum. Like
Mhm.
look at the week or the 2 weeks of work, right? Is it the same report or the
Right.
same project? How does that lay out, and why does it lay out that way? The same way you're going to give a status update, like, is the same opportunity you would have to catalog and track what we were talking about from your own time estimates, right? the, don't have somebody take that responsibility from you. Take ownership of you wanting to do that for yourself, because you're going to become more valuable down the road when you groom or estimate the next thing, right? Then
Mhm.
you're locked in, and you know you're going to give yourself more time, as opposed to somebody having to try to figure out, like, is that aligning with like the work output you do, or is it just something you've learned as part of the skill set along the way? And there's an interesting, I think, comment and dynamic between like consulting and full-time employment. I think you can treat them the same way. The only difference is, if a company is paying for a consultant, there is no wiggle room. They expect them to know everything about the area that
Mm.
they're
Right.
paying them for, because they're paying a premium. The benefit in an FTE is there are certain points that you may not know. The great part is you can estimate. It's going to take me a couple days to ramp up into that, like to
Right.
understand this area, that then I can get the opportunity to apply. So you're
Correct.
learning things on the job while you're going through these processes, and there shouldn't be an expectation that you know absolutely everything,
Yes.
right? So take those and take like a different view of your job, and like bring more meaning to your daily job, and you're gonna be more productive, not just now but also in the future.
Yeah. I like Nico's post, and it's basically about overestimating. He's like, I like my overestimating like I like my ground beef, 15% to 10% fat.
Yeah, always, man. There's
Yeah.
always some swag in there, because like the more projects you do, and I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody listening kind of knows this as well, like you need the wiggle room, because there's always going to be something that comes up. Always. Like,
Mhm.
you're never gonna, like, when you first look at something and you go, oh man, that's gonna take me, because it's beautiful, and then and then you start to see the warts, right? And you're like, oh crap, like there's 2 hours, there's
Mhm.
2 hours. It happens on every project, so you got to give yourself a little wiggle
Yeah.
room. And the number one rule that I laugh, because like I've not been doing a good job lately, is it is always better to or under promise and over deliver.
Overload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give you
100%.
like the trick with estimates is you want to be close always, but you always want to deliver early if you can.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So what are some of like so the tools or
Yeah,
methods that
I
you
was
guys
just
use
about this. Yeah.
to like keep yourself in check or on track with your productivity?
That's funny you're gonna say that. I was gonna ask, do you guys use any GTD or get things done tools? Because I really don't. I have not found the value in that, like the checklist sort of things.
Oh, I do that all the time. I
Yeah.
use DevOps. So
Yeah.
yeah, so everything. So where I mean, I'm running my business now, so I now have employees and people who doing extra work. So I'm doing a lot of the planning portion of what's going on now. I'm acting more of like a uh, you know, director of people,
Right.
right? But 100% business ops all the way.
For personal.
Sorry, DevOps all the way for
Right.
basically everything. If I'm working on it, it's probably going into DevOps at some level.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
the ability of having topical things. I
Hmm.
have the ability of making issues and tasks, and it's kind of I think it's the agile method,
Right.
not the Scrum method. Scrum method has too many layers deep for me. I think I use agile. It's a little bit lighter weight. But then I make topics, I make buckets, I write out what I'm going to work on, and then with everything I write down, I try to t-shirt size it, or at least throw down what I think the hours should be for everything. So one of the, to Seth's point earlier, if you write out tasks of things, it's helpful to always write down how long you think you're going to take. Again, you can't measure or correct things if you don't ever have a data points on it. So,
Right.
so I do that, and I have those numbers visible. And then what I do is I go to like a Kanban board, and I just basically, still a list in my mind. But then at the Kanban level, I then reprioritize things. I put the most important things at the top, and then now I know what to work on. And then I move things from my ordered list into things I'm actually working on. So I move them into my doing phase. I get stuff done, and then they're completed. I move them into to complete. So for me, a Kanban technique or Kanban board is very essential for what I do, and I put a lot of things through that. I'm trying to get my
So
wife to Kanban things at the house, but we haven't quite got there yet.
Well, I mean, Kanban boards for chores, man.
Come on,
That's
for
what I'm saying. I can't get
Daily
everything
chores
done.
and activities.
Yeah,
Um,
my wife always rags on me. She's like, "Well, I give you a list of 5 things, you don't ever get them all done." I'm like, "Well,
should put
if
in Kanban.
if I die today, I don't have to do 3 of them. So, I might as well only do the minimum."
I would 100% agree, like with planning tools for sure, like
Yeah.
tasks and execution. I will say, like I'll paste it in the chat as I'm going through. There was an article, Buck Woody, and he's a name in the SQL community. He's been around for forever at Microsoft. An amazing personality. I'll just say that, and hilarious. If you've ever met Buck, you know who I'm talking about. If you haven't met Buck, try to meet him before you die. Um, yeah, I ran across one of a blog he wrote a long time ago that has like helped me immensely, especially with how like busier my life has gotten with having to attend more meetings, which I wish I didn't have as much meetings as I have. But it's the running to do list per day. So what I've
Mhm.
done is
Mhm.
I took I think his example has tabs of using OneNote, but I have a template that I run in one OneNote for a year, and it is basically a header of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday with the date of the day that I'm on, and it's literally the task list. And as the day goes on, I've what 10, 15 meetings a day, like the mind's going a million miles an hour. It is only at the end of the day that I can view my task list of like things that absolutely have to get done. And sometimes they push, but at least like I have that running checklist of things I need to do that's very near term, right? Other tools I use are like Lucid Chart for it, or kind of like Visio,
Mhm.
right, where you're
Mhm.
building process flows and understanding.
Those are
Because I'm a
good.
visual guy, and when you're trying to have conversations, I think businesses don't do enough of using visual tools
Yeah.
because everybody's a visual learner. When you start talking about hard concepts, you're going to lose people if you
Mhm.
don't have like the
I
box
like
that
that.
says, this thing. It's kind of like a whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like working remote, um, and taking notes during meetings. I am 100% a fan of using OneNote, and I create a meeting
Yeah.
every day, or I have a way to organize that where it's like in the day I have my meeting notes. Because like think about the amount of information in a meeting, especially if you're creating a report, like in the discovery phase where you're talking to the business. Like there are so many hidden gems that you can't remember
Yeah.
that are going to help you build a much better report if you just have the note of what the person said
Yeah.
specifically, right? So anytime I'm in a meeting, I always have my laptop open. I'm always watching people and paying attention and conversing, but I'm making quick notes behind the scenes so that I can recap and then, interject what I'm learning into, whether it's building a report, building, a story or something for planning, etc.
Well, the fact that every meeting we have is not recorded nowadays, except for scoping, is beyond me. So, I,
Yeah, I
Uh,
get that,
no,
but at the same
seriously,
time,
do you go
like
back and watch them though? Like
I
no. You
I
know what?
record stuff, but I don't watch them
that's
You'll
why
again.
you don't have to. So what I'll do, and this is probably a terrible process, but especially for scoping calls, usually they'll do the transcript, and then you can use VS Code or a VLC and actually put the subtitles on and actually search. Like I remember we talked about this, and you
Yep.
can search for that, and the transcripts are pretty good.
Yes.
yeah,
So I can go back and oh my gosh, like, especially when we've been
yeah,
building like business applications, to go through and go, what did we exactly talk about here? Kind of thing. What was that output? Because our brains, there's two uh uh psychologists from Israel. I think one was, I don't remember their names, but there's been a few books about them. But they basically said the brain overestimates their ability all the time. Like we
Oh, I could
overestimate
totally
our
see that.
judging ability, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I'll try to find that book. But basically, one of those things is you get an hour of information in a scoping call. Do you expect that you're going to remember every vital piece of information? Again, if you're writing notes, to me
I
sometimes
yeah.
I'm losing what they're saying at that time, because you're taking away from actually listening. So for very important calls, I will do the transcript and I
yeah.
will like sync that with VLC. So
I don't like it's an interesting concept, and I would agree for like the backup are really detailed.
yeah.
Um, I think note taking is a skill you learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like I would advocate that it's a much more useful skill than like relying on a transcript. And reason being is
Yeah.
If I say, hey, Tommy, I want you to go write a blog, and I want you to condense what we talked about in this hour-long podcast, right?
Yeah.
I'm literally taking
But
notes.
that's
Can I
This is what
look
I'm
at my
doing.
Can I look at my notes
Yeah.
and my condensed version of everything we're discussing
so.
Yep.
and write that blog in 10 minutes versus
Yes.
you going, oh, I think at like halfway through
Well,
we started talking about this thing, and then I have to read that
Right.
and do the same thing that I'm talking about. You're going to read the transcript and you're going to pull out the nugget of information from
Mhm.
that thing
Yep.
that was valuable. I'm doing the same thing live.
So two very different things, and I see what you're saying, but one for someone who's been now 30 years running diagnosed with ADHD. So, and
Good point.
good point. Yeah, thank you. And then two, it's very different doing a summary blog or like a detailed blog to actually building understanding a business season, trying to tie that to the technical data points.
I agree.
And
They're good
so,
both.
and like not saying one is faster. Obviously, one's faster than the other, but I have found with certain conversations, not necessarily every single conversation, but certain calls that I've had where it's basically like, hey, we're dealing, situation X, we're trying to understand the data points and then the business pain points with this, and then translate this into a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Having that recorded and going back to, oh, they said it was here kind of thing, it was in this obscure thing that I would have never not necessarily written down, but we were writing something else down, and that was just another piece of nugget. It's helped me, and again, it's not for every use case, but
So
I do love recordings for training too. Like,
well,
Yeah.
okay,
like
so that I will
especially for grooming and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So recording. So where I think recordings fit, right? So in meetings, if people want to have the recordings, fine. I've had people. So when I do a lot of things, I'm usually instructing companies around
Right.
certain things, and one of the assets that I do. So free advice for the people out there who are doing consultancies, right? Whenever you're doing any kind of training to a team, it makes a lot of sense and it adds a lot of value if you record that session for them.
Mhm.
And that becomes part of, and this is what I communicate to clients, is that becomes part of your center of excellence, right? Be very narrowed about what that training content is, build a specific, hour-long content, and then cut off the video and start and stop it multiple times.
Right.
So you actually have the concept of like, hey, we're going to talk, you almost kind of make what I do, I make an outline somewhere else of what I'm going to talk about. Hey, we're going to talk about publishing to web or publishing to the powerbi.com. Here's the topic. I start recording, we go through the topic, we answer questions, we cut it off, and we're done. 20, 30 minutes of talking. We now have a piece of content that I've taught a couple people, but those people will move on. Other people in the organization will need to hear it. And so now the company can then take that and put that in a list or a groomed list of data things, right? And that can be pointed to as like this is how we do some of our training. So it adds value to the people immediately, and it adds long-term value for people because you're reusing that content.
Right.
What I will say is I want to make one note around videos and transcripts. There was one tool, I don't know where it came from. It was some conference that Microsoft did where they actually had transcripts running in line when the video was going. And for whatever, I don't know how it worked, but there was a search bar above the transcript. And what it would do is you could type in a word, and when you typed in the word like DAX or measures or KPIs, it would search through all the text. It would highlight the pieces of text, and on the number line on the right-hand side, you could skip to the next word inside the transcript. And what it would do is it would automatically feed the video to that point in time when that word was said. I don't know where this exists. I don't know where it went. I don't know why it's not a thing anymore. But like, because of the amount of videos that are easily recordable in meetings now, this is something that we need. Like, I need to be able to feed a video and a transcript, the VVT thing that corresponds the video to the timing of the transcripts. I need to feed that into a machine somewhere, and I need to be able to search for words in stuff, and it should
VS Code extension.
It should just auto skip to that point. Was that in VS Code?
You can get a download extension to do VTT. You can't like necessarily add the video to it.
But
that's exactly what I do.
But that's what I'm saying though.
Stream.
I'm not interested. Yeah, I'm not interested
Stream.
in seeing. I'm not interested in seeing just like, because if you're doing the page
program,
yeah,
it's called Microsoft Stream.
That's right.
But is it? Does all of your videos get stuck in there?
All the text, it's got the full transcript right next to it as the video goes on.
So now if I think about like big data stuff, I mean, this is big data to some degree, right? As I pull these videos and stick them all together, this really should be an ability for me to search for a word across any video at any point in time. So not just pick the video and search
Right.
the one. I should be able to say DAX, and I should
Right.
have the list of all the videos and all the transcripts wherever that shows up, and I should be able to pick from a list, an abbreviated list of where all this DAX conversation happens, and
Mhm.
so I could literally click these different nuggets and see exactly when
Right.
where that video clip came from. That would be huge.
So we probably went down another rabbit
Million
hole
dollar
of video.
million dollar idea right there that
Um,
someone else can go build, and then I'll go use it.
Let me ask one question because we've been really talking about this, and I think they are two separate ideas or modes of thought where you have project-based productivity and personal productivity. And I would assume they're different. So I guess for the personal,
Why?
no.
Why?
Hmm. So I would say project-based, right, would be multiple people. If you were say you're productive in a day, you're dealing with multiple projects, but you're also trying to do the micro things. Project-based, you're dealing with multiple people. It's dependent on other people. Like,
Your task list is just different.
would you use the same method?
The same methods that I do. Yeah.
Okay.
You have things you want to accomplish in a day. The other thing we didn't talk about that I would
Yeah.
highly recommend is take 15 minutes in the beginning of your day to figure out, like, if you're not doing it at the beginning of your day, do it the day before, right? So that
Mhm.
you have a clear idea of what you want to accomplish in the day, and
Right.
then execute against that. And at the end of the day, you're going to feel productive if you've accomplished the things you set out to do, right? And those, like, I think those are the same. Do I want to build a process flow for my team? Do I need to do these, set up this planning versus I need to build 3 views and, connect all these dimensions
Right.
together or, into the fact table. Completely different, but the tasks are, you still have a bullet
Yeah.
list of things that you want to accomplish in a day, and either you execute against them or you don't.
You know what? I like that. I like that. I have no qualms. So, I guess we are running on time. Do you guys have any final kind
Oh,
of
geez, we already talked all the time.
I know.
My gosh.
We
So
Have
we
we
were too busy
now the
talking
question
about biking and health
I
and
know, right?
have we been
Too busy
productive on this
getting
call?
distracted for
That's
the
the
first part of
question.
our productivity call. A couple tools that I think we didn't note. I mean, one of them we talked about Lucid Charts. Another
Mhm.
one that I use that is free. I just want to call out some names here. Draw.io.
Mhm.
It looks the same as Lucid Charts. It doesn't have quite the sharing capabilities that Lucid Charts does, but it's a free version. You don't have to pay for it. So that's diagramming, images, flow charts. To Seth's point, I actually use Adobe XD a lot for my diagrams. It's a little bit prettier, and I can use SVGs and a very easy format. So I know Adobe XD is for like application dev, like you're building a web app or a mobile phone app. It's more around that, but I find that the UI is very simple. Apparently, Adobe XD does not need to be a part of the Adobe suite. You don't have to buy it. You can download Adobe XD for free and not pay for it. So I like that part of it, and it's a very easy, very clean interface. And so what I do is I put a lot of my architectural diagrams in that one XD file. And so when I build architectural components, I put it all in the same file, and my customers are very much like, "Wow, look at all this stuff!" Like I can zoom in on different spots.
You've rebuilt Visio and Lucidchart.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly into a single. So I like that program. Another one that I really like collaborating with people is called Miro, Miro.
Mhm.
It's another board visualization program type thing, but you can actually have multiple people in the same document, and you can see their cursors moving around. And as they type notes, you can type notes and add enhance things. So I really like the Miro experience. I think it's been very helpful from a collaborative standpoint when you're working remote. Um, I like Microsoft Whiteboard, but the new version they updated it to has just not been as much. I haven't enjoyed it as much. So I would like to find a better program where I could actually draw on a program with a pen on my Surface Book a bit more. Because I mean, I do like communicating with that, but the tools for the new whiteboard just don't
Yeah.
cut it for me.
I love the whiteboard when I had the big Surface Hub at
Yes.
the firm I used to work for. It was
Yeah.
like a giant wall of
Screen.
Does
electric
anyone use
whiteboard.
paper and pen anymore
No.
or anything at all?
I don't have any pen
I
or
still
paper in my
do.
basement. Like my
My
office,
goodness.
every time my wife will come down, she's like, "Can I write a note on this new folder?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Where's your pen?" I'm like, "I don't have any pens down here. Everything's digital.
Yeah, it's all in one note, man.
It's all in one note."
I still write even if it's on my iPad with the pen because I did remember reading this once that writing compared to typing helps you remember better. So sometimes I'll actually write it down.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that.
especially like kind of like the bigger items or once a week.
Um,
So with that, I think I mean for me, my last thoughts here are, my summary of this productivity tools, right? You have to find what works for you, right?
Mhm.
And I would say for me, it's a lot around dedicating time to learning and dedicating time to doing work things. So find tools that help you kind of allocate your time appropriately. And I'd say, if you don't know what you're spending your time on, just start somewhere. Start writing down what you're working on, start estimating how long it takes you to get certain things done. But always, if you're gonna estimate something, try and write it down and estimate how long it think it will take you. Do the work. Come back to it and figure out if your estimates are right. Because that's, like, to Seth's point earlier, that's a learned skill of being able to estimate how long it will take you to do something and figure out ways of estimating things you've never done before. Right? There's,
Mhm.
I mean, this happens all the time. You're asked to do something that you have
Experience.
never produced, you've never made it, or you've never seen it before. So you have to get better at estimating unknown pieces of that.
Yeah, I think in general, right? Like we live in most likely all of us live in businesses where the challenges are get it done fast. And I think we've covered a lot of good ideas today to help people become intentional about their job because you're going to be more productive when you're intentional. And it also brings up this topic of like virtuous waste, right? Like is what you're doing during the day repeatable? Like are you
Right.
going to do it again? Is it worth the extra 15 minutes to make sure you do it the same, or you make it easier for yourself, down the road? And just removing distractions and having a clear idea of what you want to accomplish, have a schedule for it, and try to remove as many distractions as possible is how you increase your productivity across the board.
Think my mix would be 80% blue pill, 20% red pill for those who so because sometimes it can be all for those who are wondering, this is not an actual drug, this is the matrix kind of thing. So just let's but sometimes like the snippets was all red pill the other day and it was like I got it, I'm like, oh. Anyways, I would say definitely there is that mix of you have to have show useful output as Dan said and actually can almost prove to yourself or write the micro things consistency, but you have to also open time with a leash of your research and learning.
Yes.
So
Give yourself a spike, right? A
just don't
spike
take
to
the
learning.
whole red pill. Yeah.
Yeah, write
So
write it down. Write it on something. I'm going to spend an hour to learn this new thing. I'm going to take an hour and
right.
learn some Deneb, or I'm going to take my
Yeah.
lunch and I'm going to eat my
Y-
lunch and I'm going to learn some
Yeah.
Just pick a skill that you're interested in
And
and spike it for an hour
choose
period of time.
what you're trying to learn from that
This
rather
is
than just
why,
learning it.
yeah, this is why you need a whiteboard because you need to parking lot those ideas. And parking lot is like in
Mm,
a meeting where you
Oh
don't want
yeah.
to
yeah,
discuss it,
yeah.
but it's important, right? That's what you do for learning stuff. Like if you're in a rabbit hole and you're like, oh my gosh, that squirrel, right? Like I want to
Right.
go learn that. That's the stuff you write down for like the next time you
Right.
have a learning block.
The
100%.
best time I learn is when I have the intention of what I'm trying to learn rather than, oh, that's new.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, agreed. Cool. Well, with that, we've burned a full hour. Thank you all very much for your time. Our only ask for you as listeners is to just share the content. Share this with someone else who you might find as valuable. We didn't actually talk a lot about Power BI things on this one as much, but this is, I think, still very relevant, and I think a lot of people work through how to be productive and what kind of patterns work well for you staying productive to be able to continue to produce value and not burn out, basically. So that's our only ask. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast? Blah blah blah. Tommy, where can you find the podcast?
So if you're listening live right now, you make sure to subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Leave us a rating. It helps us out a ton.
Mhm.
If you're listening to the podcast, leave a rating too. But also, if you want to join the conversation live, you can do so every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 in the morning. Follow Power BI Tips on YouTube and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. We'll see you on Thursday.